I don't think I could do this anymore. I don't know why, but I'm okay with walking away from this because there's no way I'm dragging down the legacy.
On the night of July 23rd, 2026, nearly 20,000 fans inside Madison Square Garden watched something they never expected to see. Jon Bon Jovi, the man who built a 40-year career on never quitting, walked to the edge of the stage, placed his hand on his chest, and told a sold-out arena that he could not go on. His bandmates rushed to embrace him. The crowd fell silent, and the reason behind it all was far more devastating than a sinus infection. The night the music stopped. If you were inside Madison Square Garden on the night of July 23rd, you already know that something felt wrong from the very first song. Fans who had attended the previous 7 shows in this residency could feel it immediately. That familiar power in Jon's voice was missing, and what replaced it was a thin, strained sound that got worse with every passing minute. This was not a man having an off night. This was a man whose body was failing him in real time, in front of 20,000 people who had paid hundreds of dollars to witness his comeback. The band powered through 14 songs. On a normal night during this residency, they would play between 20 and 23. By the time they reached Bed of Roses, Jon could barely finish the vocals, and he stepped back from the microphone and let the entire arena sing the closing section for him. Most people in that crowd had no idea they were watching the moment a carefully constructed comeback started to unravel. Before performing what would become the final song of the night, Jon addressed the audience with a level of honesty that most performers would never show on stage. He told them he knew he was letting them down and that it was not like him to do that. He said they were going to do one more song and that he was going to need their help because he was hurting badly. Train lead singer Pat Monahan, who was actually in the arena that night as a regular fan and had no scheduled role in the show, was pulled backstage and came out to help carry the vocals on "Livin' on a Prayer." Even with Monahan handling much of the singing, Jon relied on the crowd to get through it. When the song ended, he told the audience not to throw away their ticket stubs because he was going to figure something out. He hugged each of his bandmates one by one, gave the cheering crowd a thumbs up, and walked off stage. His representatives later confirmed he had been battling a sinus infection. And while that was technically true, anyone paying close attention to the previous 2 shows already knew this was about something much deeper than a stuffy nose. Fans on social media were deeply divided in the hours after the cancellation. Many called it heartbreaking, but said they were still blown away by the effort Jon had given. One attendee wrote that the crowd gave the band their all, and the band gave it right back, and that Jon was still their favorite rock star, no matter what. A Deadline commenter, who claimed to have attended the infamous 2022 Indianapolis show, the very performance that led directly to Jon's surgery, wrote that it was deeply troubling to see the same warning signs appearing just 2 weeks into the comeback. 2 nights earlier, the band had quietly dropped some of their biggest songs from the setlist and shortened the show without any public explanation, and the pattern pointed to a problem that had been building for over a decade. A voice slowly disappearing. The trouble with Jon Bon Jovi's voice did not start in 2026. It did not even start in 2022, when the world first learned about his surgery. The seeds of this crisis were planted all the way back in 2013, during one of the most chaotic periods in the band's history, and almost nobody outside the inner circle connected the dots at the time. In 2013, guitarist Richie Sambora abruptly quit the band hours before a scheduled show in Calgary during the Because We Can tour. Sambora had been in and out of rehab for years, and he later said his departure came down to deep family problems and needing to be there for his daughter. But what most fans did not realize was the devastating impact his exit had on Jon's voice. Sambora was not just the lead guitarist. He was the other half of a vocal partnership that had defined Bon Jovi's sound for 3 decades. When Sambora walked away, Jon was left to carry 80 remaining tour dates, essentially singing for 2 people, covering his own parts and all the harmonies Sambora had always handled. John told AARP magazine that it was after that tour when everything started to go south, and he could not figure out whether the damage was psychological or physical. By 2015, the signs were becoming impossible to hide. A growing breathiness, less volume, moments where the pitch would slip. John told the How to Fail podcast that his body had crashed out from under him and he was not even fully aware of how bad it had gotten. He tried everything you could possibly try to fix it on his own. In the Hulu docuseries, Thank You, Good Night, he listed out every remedy: lasers, acupuncture, vitamins, collagen injections, exercise. He pushed through tours from 2015 to 2019, forcing his way through performances while the instrument he depended on most was slowly deteriorating underneath him. And if you think about that for a moment, the loneliness of knowing something is wrong with the one thing that defines your entire identity, and not being able to fix it no matter what you try, that is a specific kind of suffering that most people will never fully understand. Then, the pandemic hit, and the 2-year break from touring that COVID forced upon every musician in the world did not heal John's voice. It exposed just how badly it had declined. When Bon Jovi returned to performing in 2022, the difference was undeniable, and the person who finally told John the truth was the only one he would have believed. The words that changed everything. After a 2022 arena show in Nashville, John came off stage convinced he had given the crowd his heart. He turned to his wife Dorothea and told her it went well. She looked at him and said something that would alter the course of his entire career. She told him it was not great, and that she had seen him be great. John and Dorothea have been together since high school. They married in 1989 and have been side by side through every single chapter of Bon Jovi's 40-year run. John later told People magazine that the conversation was beyond heartbreaking and devastating, but that there was no one better than her to tell him the truth. He described on a podcast how everyone else around a rock star is either a yes man, someone getting paid, or a fan who desperately wants you to be good. But Dorothea was his confessional box. The only person on the planet he knew would never give him false reassurance. And notice what his brain did with that information. He told people that when he heard her words, the immediate voice inside his head said it was time to retire. Not time to see a doctor. Not time to rest. His first instinct was that it was over. That tells you everything about the psychological weight this man had been carrying, probably for years, without admitting it to anyone. The fear of losing your voice when your voice is literally who you are is not just a professional concern. It is an existential crisis. Within days, John drove himself to the hospital. He did not send an assistant. He did not schedule a consultation for the following week. He got in his car alone and drove, because the desperation to save whatever was left of his ability was that overwhelming. And when the doctors showed him what was actually happening inside his throat, even he was not prepared for what he saw. The dying cord. The diagnosis was worse than anything John had imagined. One of his vocal cords had literally atrophied. He explained in the Hulu docuseries that vocal cords are supposed to look parallel, roughly the same thickness, but one of his had swollen to the size of a thumb, while the other had shrunk to the size of a pinky. The strong cord was physically pushing the weak one aside every time he tried to sing. In his own words, the cord was dying. The doctor told him this was partly a natural consequence of aging, that vocal folds thin out over time. But 40 years of performing at the absolute highest level, belting out arena anthems 4 nights a week, had accelerated the process far beyond what was normal. John was baffled because he had always taken meticulous care of his voice. He had never smoked, never used substances, always done warm-ups before shows and cool-downs after. He told The Independent that he had sung with Pavarotti, that he was a trained vocalist who had practiced the craft for 4 decades. He was not some amateur who had wrecked his voice through carelessness. And yet, The instrument was failing anyway. The surgeon performed a procedure called medialization, placing 2 pieces of Gore-Tex on the outside of the vocal cords but inside the neck. Jon described it in the docuseries as a facelift for the vocal cords. The cutting-edge implant was designed to push the weakened cord back into position so that both sides would fire symmetrically again. The surgery itself was a success, but it was only the beginning of what would become a 3-year battle to relearn how to use his own voice. 19 months after the procedure, Jon still could not commit to a tour. The band had a new album ready to release, but the question of whether their frontman would ever stand on a stage again remained unanswered. Jon admitted in the Hulu docuseries that he had many moments of genuine doubt during that period, but he kept finding what he described as a little ray of hope to push himself forward, only to get punched in the nose by some new setback the next day. He told the Today Show that you have to be physically, mentally, and spiritually ready to do it, and he was not there yet. In April 2024, Jon gave an interview to the Sunday Times that sent shockwaves through the music world. He said that if his singing was not great, and he could not be the guy he once was, then he was done, and he was at peace with that. He compared himself to a quarterback facing the last ball he would ever throw. And then he said the line that captured the full weight of his fear. He said he did not ever need to be the Fat Elvis. While Jon spent every single day in vocal therapy, fighting to rebuild something he was not sure could be rebuilt, something remarkable happened around him, the brotherhood that held the line. Not one member of Bon Jovi walked away. Nobody started looking for other projects. Nobody floated the idea of retirement. Tico Torres stayed behind the drums. David Bryan stayed behind the keyboards. Phil X, Hugh McDonald, John Shanks, and Everett Bradley all showed up for rehearsals as if a tour was already on the calendar, even when there was no date in sight and no guarantee one would ever come. Jon told People magazine in June 2026 that the sacrifices each of them had made were on a completely different level. They told him they were with him, and every day of every rehearsal they were there. He said his love for them had only deepened. And if you have ever gone through something terrifying in your own life, you know exactly how much it matters when the people around you refuse to leave, even when the outcome is uncertain. That kind of loyalty does not just sustain a career, it sustains the person inside the career. Even Richie Sambora, who had not performed with the band since his 2013 departure, publicly said he would come back if Jon recovered. Sambora told the Alison Hagendorf show that if Jon got his voice back, he would go play, that he had songs ready and the world needed it. 13 years after walking away, the man who had arguably caused the chain reaction that led to Jon's vocal decline was now saying the door was open for a return. That tells you everything about the magnitude of what was at stake. In October 2025, Jon appeared on the Today Show and announced the Forever Tour. Madison Square Garden, 9 sold-out nights. The comeback was officially on. 16 days of proof, and then the crash. On July 7, 2026, the house lights dropped inside a sold-out Madison Square Garden. There was no opening act. Just after 7:30 in the evening, the spotlight hit the stage, and Bon Jovi walked out. Jon opened with a cover of With a Little Help from My Friends, performed in the soulful gospel arrangement made famous by Joe Cocker. The choice was so deliberate, it almost hurt. After 4 years of silence, after surgery and therapy and doubt and fear, those lyrics carried a meaning that went far beyond nostalgia. Jon told the crowd he had not heard a live audience in 4 years and thanked them for waiting it out. The reviews from opening night were encouraging but honest. His voice was noticeably different from the Bon Jovi of the 1980s. He was more stationary on stage, gripping the mic stand or strumming his guitar rather than sprinting across the arena floor. But the 21-song setlist proved he could handle the physical demands of a full concert. The comeback was real. Over the next 7 shows, the band settled into a groove, and fans from around the world flew in for the residency, with at least 5 different languages heard in the MSG concourse on any given night. But 9 shows in under 3 weeks is a punishing schedule, even for a singer whose voice has never been compromised. For a 64-year-old man whose vocal cords were held together by Gore-Tex implants, it was a calculated risk. And by night 6, the cracks had already started showing. The band quietly dropped Wanted Dead or Alive and Always from the setlist, two of their most demanding songs. By night 8, Jon's body made the decision for him, the promise and the price. Before Jon walked off the stage on July 23rd, he made a promise to the crowd that carried an almost unbearable weight. He told them to hold on to their ticket stubs because he was going to figure out how to reschedule. And then he said something that broke the hearts of everyone watching. He told them he felt great, that he would see them again soon. As of the days following the cancellation, the 9th and final MSG show on July 26th, and all 5 European stadium dates remained on the schedule. Edinburgh's Murrayfield Stadium on August 28th, Dublin's Croke Park on August 30th, and 3 nights at London's Wembley Stadium in September were all still listed on the band's official website. The financial and emotional stakes for pulling any of those shows would be enormous, not just for the band, but for the tens of thousands of fans who had already booked flights and hotels from across the globe. But Jon drew a line in 2024. He said he would never be the artist who pushes through diminished performances out of ego or obligation. He said he did not need to be the Fat Elvis. The man who drove himself to the hospital alone in 2022 because he was so desperate to save his voice now faced the very same calculation he thought the surgery had settled forever. The sinus infection was the immediate cause of what happened on July 23rd. But the real story is about a man who has spent 4 decades refusing to give his audience anything less than everything, and a rebuilt body that may no longer be able to deliver on that promise. Jon Bon Jovi built his legacy on resilience. He was the kid from Sayreville, New Jersey, who opened for ZZ Top at Madison Square Garden in 1983 and went on to sell more than 130 million records worldwide. He has survived lineup changes, the loss of original bassist Alec John Such, who passed away in June 2022, a decade of silent vocal decline, career-threatening surgery, and a 3-year rehabilitation that pushed him to the edge of retirement. He once told the Sunday Times that 60 is different from 50, and that his biggest fear was forgetting how to sing entirely, that he would be crushed if he could never do it again. Whether the Forever Tour lives up to its name or becomes the last chapter in one of rock's most extraordinary careers depends entirely on what Jon Bon Jovi's voice can endure in the weeks ahead. And the only person who truly knows the answer is the same man who stood at the edge of that Madison Square Garden stage, hand on his chest, and chose honesty over performance one more time. Let us know in the comments what you think Jon should do next, and whether you believe the comeback can survive this setback. Share this with anyone who has been following this incredible story, because this conversation is far from over.